Hi everyone, thanks for checking in. It's Adam Coburn here at Low & Co. And for the last time this year, we're looking at the Wellington real estate market for the month of November 2025, comparing it to the last couple of years and seeing if we can identify the trends. Look, in summary, folks, we've had a bit of a rough time in Wellington. In November, it appears that the values have bounced off the bottom a little bit, but we take the small wins. Oddly, it coincides with quite a fewer sales in November. So it's kind of contradictory that we would have significantly fewer sales, which indicates, which would suggest on its own a cooling market, but then values which have increased, which indicates a strengthening market. Of course, it's only one data point in both cases, and one data point doesn't make a trend, so we'll see as things emerge. But the other thing I suppose to say is that the sales that take place in November are a result of activity typically that would happen in October. So it isn't necessarily inconsistent. So you get the sales that take place in November, which produce the underlying values for the month. But that was activity from October, so there's sometimes a bit of a delay there. Anyway, we'll see as the next few months as to whether there's a trend or not. But that's the area of concern, I suppose, for sellers, is that the number of sales declined significantly in the month compared to the previous November. News for buyers continues to be there's still a ton of choice out there, so get in amongst it if you are in the market to purchase. Let's look at the details. Median sale price $790 in November versus $775 a year ago, so that's a small increase. For a very long time, I've been saying, for well over 3 years now, I've been saying that these median sale prices have been going broadly sideways, roughly stable since sort of late-ish winter 2022, up here, down there, and so on. Interestingly, you see there, look at the blue bar chart, the last 3 months since August have seen consistent increases. So again, is that an emerging trend? We shall see. If you follow these videos, you know I don't pay too much attention to the median sale price because it is impacted not just by underlying values but also the mix of properties sold. The best guide to underlying values, in my opinion, is the Real Estate Institute House Price Index. So let's look at that. Here's the league tables showing the drops in the various regions around the country, the drop in values since the peak in late 2021. Wellington continues and has been pretty much the whole time the biggest loser, if you like. 25.8% down since the peak in late 2021, nearly 22% down in Auckland, so not that far behind, versus just over 15% drop across the whole country. Over the last year, Wellington also has fallen further than any other part of the country. Much smaller numbers, of course, so 2.8% down for Wellington, 1.5% for Auckland, and down 0.2% for the whole country. Over the last 3 months, a slightly different story. So Wellington at 0.1% up. Let's call that flat, pretty much zero. But it's not the lowest number. There are a couple of regions there that have gone backwards in the last couple of months. So yeah, at least we're not at the bottom of the pile over the last 3 months anyway. So let's look at this. So you see there, look, the previous low point in the house price index in underlying values was in May 2022. Then we recovered into the election, and then we've very, very gradually kind of deteriorated since then. In October, the values breached that previous low point of May 2022, falling a little bit lower, but thankfully in November they have bounced up a little bit. So if you look really closely at those lines, and I do admit you have to look very closely indeed, you'll see that at the end there they have just ticked upwards again. So that is some welcome relief, or a bit of a relief for those of us who are trying to sell properties. So you see the graph there for the Wellington region. The blue line is the monthly results, the orange line is the 3 monthly, and the grey line is the yearly. So you see both the blue and the orange line there, the monthly and the 3 monthly results there, have been heading upwards in the last few months. So it is going in the right direction, albeit very slowly. As per the grey line, you can see it's still on a 12-month basis prices or values have dropped, but the last few months it is heading in the right direction. Over the last year, across the different territorial authorities in Wellington, they're all negative to varying degrees. So we have seen over the last 12 months varying degrees of weakness in the different territorial authorities. In the last 3 months, there's more positive than there is negative there. So generally signs of recovering to varying degrees over the last 3 months across the various territorial authorities. Wellington City in particular, quite a decent recovery in November. Now again, November is only 1 month, so let's see what December holds and January. Bearing in mind December and January are funny months because you do tend to get quite low sales volumes, much less activity in those months. But nonetheless, that'll give us some further guidance as to whether this is a trend or whether it was just a blip. Number of listings, 856 in November versus 866 a year ago and 783 2 years ago. So pretty much exactly the same as we saw last November, very stable from last year to this year in November. A bit of an uptick versus November 2023. That was just after the election and when the market was quite starved of stock, so that was coming off a bit of a lower base. And you can see there from the red 6 monthly trend line there that the last couple of months have been pretty strong, October and November, in terms of number of listings. And so that line, which has been trending down, which is good for sellers, going back up again. Again, December and January tends to be lower listing volume months, so I would expect that red line will probably at least stabilise. It won't continue a steep incline, I don't think. We're still not up to November norms, so on average in November over the last 15 years or so, we've about 925 new listings coming to market, so at 856. Albeit the same as last November, we're still not up to normal levels of listing volumes. So again, as a seller, that's a positive sign. You're not seeing the same number of new listings come to market as we typically see in a November. What about number of sales? So again, look at that red line. You can see that over the last 3 years or so, the number of sales has been increasing very slowly, but pretty consistently increasing, albeit off anemically low levels of sales, but consistently increasing over time. But over the last 6, 7, 8 months, that red line has pretty much plateaued. So that growth in sale volumes has kind of steadied in the last 6 to 8 months or so. But 723 sales in November versus 870 last November. So clearly that's quite a big drop. And as I sort of indicated at the top, 17% down on the number of sales from last November. That's a bit of a worrying sign. Typically what we've seen in the last 15 or so months, and we'll see this in the next slide there, we've seen more sales taking place than we saw the same month a year ago, and that's been pretty consistently the case actually for more like about 2 years now. But you can see from that red line there, it's just dipped down below the x-axis, which means actually for the first time in quite a while over the last 6 months, we've sold fewer houses than we sold in the same 6 month period a year ago. Only just fewer, tipped over the edge there by that quite slow number for November. So again, let's keep our eye on this to see what's going to unfold over the next few months. How long is it taking to sell? Still quite a long time, folks. 46 days in November versus 42 a year ago, 34 2 years ago. So again, you can see that red line generally has been increasing. So the market has been very slowly deteriorating. It's been taking slowly longer to sell properties. However, since June, the number of days to sell has been on the decline. It's still significantly longer than the normal for November, the long-term average, which is about 34 days, but it is on the decline since June. So that's kind of like a mixed bag there. Inventory, 6 weeks worth of inventory on the market, 16 versus 13 a year ago and 13 also 2 years ago. Interestingly, 16 weeks worth of inventory. We have had that level of inventory for the last 4 months consecutively. 16 weeks is also only just longer than the long-term average at 15 weeks, but it is significantly longer than what we have normally seen in the last 10 years or so, which is just over 10 weeks. So that's why, relative to recent living memory, 16 weeks worth of supply, that compared to what we've seen in the last 10 years of 10 weeks or so, that indicates the weaker, the buyer's market that we're kind of used to over the last few years. Trade Me listings, 2811 versus 2703 a year ago and 2,069 2 years ago. Significantly more listings compared to 2 years ago. Again, that was just shortly after the election. We were starved of supply going into the election. After the election, it started increasing significantly. But compared to that lower base, yes, we're significantly increased. Only just a few more listings than we saw a year ago. As is often the case, we see an increase up to about November, and then coming into Christmas it starts declining, which is exactly what we've seen there. But overall, over the last number of months, sort of 6-7 months or so, we've seen about the same level, marginally more listings on Trade Me than we saw in the same month a year ago. So look, it's quite a mixed bag, folks. In summary, values in Wellington are down a little bit versus a year ago, but up slightly in the last 3 months. New listings are about the same as we saw a year ago, but still below November norms. Sales volumes are significantly down, and this is the one data point which to me sort of has me raise my eyebrows. Well down versus November of last year, and again, just like the new listing volumes, sale volumes are also well below November norms. Duration to sell is still quite long. It's up versus a year ago, but over the last 4 or 5 months it has been coming down, so that's the silver lining. That's the good news for sellers. Inventory is still slightly above normal, but only just, and has been stable for the last 4 months or so. Trade Me listings slightly up versus last December, which is a pattern that we've seen again over the last 6 or 7 or 8 months or so. Message to sellers is that the fundamentals, the amount of supply coming to the market, has been generally decreasing, albeit very slowly, and is still not at up to normal levels yet, so that's a positive thing. The number of sales has been increasing, albeit very, very slowly. That's a positive thing, although those sales volumes have plateaued recently. So those two fundamental drivers of supply and demand, if you like, have been moving gradually in the right direction. But there is still an abundance of supply, and so until that supply gets absorbed, we're unlikely to see significant movements in values, in my opinion. So the message to sellers, yes, the fundamentals are gradually improving, although fewer sales in November is a concern. And message to buyers, there's still a ton to choose from, so do get amongst it. Big thanks as always to Real Estate Institute and realestate.co for the data as always. But big thanks to you also for checking out these videos during the year. Happy Christmas and safe holidays, and look forward to seeing you in the new year. As always, if you need any individualised advice, please feel free to reach out. It's Adam at Low & Co. Cheers.